My name is Jason, and this is a special podcast episode for the Trophy Gold Incursion Writing Contest. We are talking about the results of the contest. I'm here with Jesse Ross. Hi, Jesse.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. Are you ready to do this thing?
I'm so excited. Oh my gosh.
Me too. So listeners, we are going to first reflect on the contest just a little bit, and then we are going to announce and discuss each of the runners-up for the contest. Then we're going to take a little side trek into talking about some things we have coming up for Trophy. And then we're going to conclude by announcing and discussing the winner of the contest. So let's just dive right into it. Reflections on this contest. Jesse, big picture, what do you think?
The first thing that I'll say is that I did not think that we would match the number of entries to the Trophy Dark contest. There were just so many entries there that were so good, and the format was admittedly easier for people to get into. And that the fact that we got 50 entries out of that, I just thought there was no way we were going to do that here. It's amazing.
And we ended up getting 65 entries for the gold contest. Yeah, it's amazing. So when we were mapping this contest out, especially the time frames we were giving ourselves to finish, we thought 25 or 30 entries because Dark is easier to write for. I think the structure is I just think the structure is a little easier to write for, and they're shorter, right? So I thought, okay, we got 50 Dark ones. That means we'll probably get about half for the gold, and I was going to be totally excited about that. 65, it just really was not ready for that. And I think what's exciting about those 65 entries is the quality level was so high. I mean, everyone was taking the contest really, really seriously. I think I ended up with 25 that I thought that checked all the boxes in terms of being good enough to win, right? You had a pretty high number too, 17 or something, right?
I had 17, yeah.
A great ratio of just really, really high quality entries. I don't think there were any entries that were bad.
No, absolutely not.
There were many that were very, very good. And so I was really excited and gratified by that. I was super happy that people took it seriously. Other thoughts?
Yeah, it was, so after the contest, we popped into Discord and sort of checked it. So we had set up a channel for people to converse and share ideas and look over each other's entries and things like that. And one, I was impressed by just the sheer number of people who were either new to Trophy, this was their first time writing for Trophy, or just new to writing for games in general. It seemed like there were a ton of people who took this as their first attempt to do some game writing, which is always really great to see. And then looking within that Discord channel too, just seeing how great the community was to each other. There's a lot of support. Someone said, I don't remember who it was now, but they were so surprised that their quote unquote competitors were being so thoughtful and just great with their responses and encouraging. Jim Crocker, one of the entrants, longtime Trophy community member, said, I love that you two pitched this as a contest when really it was a writer's workshop.
It really kind of was. I did the same thing. After the judging was over, I went into that Discord channel, which we were restricted from going into while we were judging, in order to keep the judging blind. But I went in there afterwards, and I was blown away by the level of discussion. I was like, whoa. They have really been talking about this, and it was kind of strange because we were preserving the blind judging so strictly. I don't think you and I had any sense of how the contest was going outside of the judging, right?
I had no idea. No. Yeah.
No idea, yeah. And so when we went into that channel, it was whoa, everyone's really into this.
Yeah, there's hundreds of messages.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, it seemed like everyone was being super supportive. And that's what we wanted, right? The contest is just a pretext for that kind of discussion, right? So that was pretty cool.
Anything else from you?
Oh, yeah, I got tons of stuff. So I observed this contest. I'm such a big picture, long-term thinker. I was pulling apart trends, and I was learning things about Trophy Gold as a system. I was really just internalizing a lot of stuff and observing a lot of things. So The vast majority of entries were fantasy. I think we expected that.
Yeah.
But what was interesting is you had what I thought were three very distinct approaches to the fantasy adventure, which came out in these entries. You had some that were what I would call a very classic dungeon crawl. You had others that felt very OSR, and then you had others that really were just out of the box and challenged the notion of what a fantasy adventure could be, right?
Yep.
And they were all... none of those approaches is better than the other, but I just thought it was interesting that you had these three different general approaches. So like on the classic side of things, just some examples I kind of pulled from my notes. Our friend Natalie Ash, she wrote one called That Colossal Wreck. That thing feels like a 1E module. I mean, it is a classic dungeon crawl, right?
Yep.
It's really well executed. You could grab it and play it right now, right? Another one, Sea Caves of Doom, felt so classically D&D.
Totally, yep.
It just had that feel, right? There were some that had more of an OSR approach. Mother's Milk was amazing. I can't remember the name of the author for Mother's Milk. I apologize for that. I can't remember the names of a lot of these authors, so I apologize. I'm apologizing in advance for any authors who I don't mention, because I don't... In some cases, I didn't even look up the name. But another one called Mother's Milk, which was a great... just that real grindhousey,
super gross,
dark, super gross OSR feel.
Yeah, I love that one.
Another one called Barathun had that same kind of vibe. Not so much gross, but very sort of just weird, like a weirdness to it.
Yeah.
The Belly of the Beast by Madelyn Ember. Madelyn, of course, we're very familiar with Madelyn's work, but this one was so great because it was what I think is termed in the OSR community a nega dungeon, meaning the only right answer is to not do it because everything, you just die at the end, and possibly the world dies at the end. There's a lot of cool stuff in that sense, and then you had some that were that really like challenged the idea of a fantasy adventure. And so the one that I'm thinking of particularly is Jen, who is a very active member in the Trophy Discord. Jen wrote one called Noble Rot, and it starts in this very violent, grindhouse-esque place, right? Because of the history of the adventure location. But it ends in this different place. Like, you are not meant to fight things or combat things. You're meant to lay the spirits to rest. And I just thought it was such a great approach and such a good reframing of fantasy adventure.
One thing that I'll chime in too, just since you mentioned Jen, is that she contributed a whole second incursion called Borrowed Time, which is well worth checking out. Just plays with these ideas of like cycles of time, and had a really good like puzzle box quality to it. Yeah, super great.
Yeah. Well, that actually leads to another note that I had, which is these incursions, some of them focused on being very precise with the established Trophy Gold incursion structure, while others really played with it and kind of pushed the boundaries. As far as the boundary pushing ones go, I think Jen's Borrowed Time was a great example of that, like the way it used temporal space as the set, like it used it
was really smart.
That was really cool. There was another one called Night Watch, and Night Watch, it honestly, truly, Night Watch was kind of its own game. And if we're being just in the interest of, I don't know if full disclosure is the right word, but Jesse and I both really loved Night Watch because it's this, it was just so evocative and so dark and so cool. We kind of decided that it didn't quite qualify for the contest in terms of being a winner because it's a different game. Ultimately, It wasn't really recognizably Trophy Gold, but I liked that the author took the core of Trophy Gold and essentially made a brand new mystery game with it, right?
Yeah.
It was really neat. But you had these other ones that were very focused on the established Trophy Gold structure, and they were successful in a different way, right? I'm thinking of The Crawling Citadel by Alexi Sargent, Harpy's Cove by Mike Ferdinando, The Source of True Purpura, which I think is by James Smith. I'm not 100% on that. Those they stayed within the lines of utilizing theme, utilizing every part of the structure, like making sure every little bit fit, and they were successful because of it. I mean, they're really playable. They're really good, really vivid. So
yeah,
those are just some things I kind of wanted to throw out there. And then the last thing I'll say is I learned a lot from this contest. I learned a lot about Trophy Gold as a game, and I learned a lot about my approach to adventure writing, I think. And that felt good because I feel like I'm an old dog, right? So I was very happy to learn that in Trophy Gold, very small mechanical tweaks and additions can lead to big fictional outcomes. I think we're going to talk about some of that stuff today. I learned that, like I kind of mentioned already, every part of the structure is a chance to tell the story of the adventure location. And another thing I kind of learned, not so much from the contest, but the contest certainly reinforced it, which is the beauty of the trophy structure. I think this is true for Dark and Gold, is you can pack in the theme, right? Yep. You take your theme and you pack it in everywhere, in the introduction, in the GM support material, in the moments, in the conditions for a dark incursion, in the various traps and treasures and things. You pack that theme in, and it can seem a little overkill on the page, but in play, it works great because in play, the incursion sort of pulls apart, right?
Right.
The theme pulls apart because you have all those moments in between when you're having table talk or when the characters are doing things that the incursion didn't consider or whatever. And so what you end up having is the theme like really just comes alive and it doesn't feel forced, right?
Right.
And so having it all kind of packed in tightly in the incursion is very effective because of the way it sort of blooms in play. I think it's just great.
Right. Whenever I run trophy games, I'm using the existing incursions as like notes that I bounce back to, right? And so having that theme everywhere means that whatever element you pick up is going to have something that reinforces that theme. And so you're right, just packing it in a way that can seem like too much is the right amount, actually.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's and I think that's what I kind of like the contest helped me understand. You can't overdo it.
Yeah.
Right? Like you literally can't overdo it because of the way gameplay happens at the table, right?
Right.
It's about giving the GM tools and even if it seems excessive, it's better to have those tools than not, right? So
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay, well here we go. The runners-up. So we had said in the instructions of the contest that we were going to have 2 runners-up and 1 winner. We had so many entries and so many entries of such a high quality level that we decided to do 4 runners-up and 1 winner. All the runners-up will get the same prize, even though we were adding 2 more, doubling the number of runners-up. So I'm excited to get into this, so let's just go right into it.
Cool.
Which incursion is the first of our runners-up here, Jesse?
So the first runner-up is Top of the World by Jim Crocker with the theme of rooftops.
Yeah, and to be clear, we mean the first of the runners-up,
yes.
Not the first runner-up.
Yes.
Top of the World by Jim Crocker. So what'd you like about this one?
Well, let's just do a little overview of it first.
Oh, overview, yeah. Please do. Yeah,
So this is in this incursion, it all takes place in a city. It's one of the only like truly urban kind of quote unquote dungeons that we had. But the treasure hunters are racing from rooftop to rooftop. So it's that kind of like classic fantasy hopping adventure while the guards are chasing you from below and you're trying to make off with whatever treasures you have in hand.
Yeah, it had the feeling of Ankh-Morpork, of Lankmar, of Lies of Loch Lamora. It had all that kind of feel to it, right?
Yeah.
So that's a great overview. What'd you like about it?
It was so fun. Like, it's just a fun read. It's super playful. Trophy, Dark especially, and sometimes Gold can go into these places that are really desperate in a kind of bleak sense. And this did not have that vibe. It's really playful. It's just a nice drift from that kind of from the expected kind of trophy environment. And yet it still feels really well integrated in that world.
Yeah, absolutely. The premise is just so great. Mm-hmm. And like you said, sometimes you just want something to be really fun.
Yeah.
And this is so fun. Every bit of it, you just want to like get in there and play this, you know,
Totally.
because it's so adventurous, so lighthearted, just great stuff. I thought that Jim did a really good job of understanding how you have to adjust the rules of Trophy Gold to deliver this experience of running through the rooftops of a city and evading guards. And the pursuit role, which is a special role that Jim created for this incursion, I think really nails that. What were your thoughts on the pursuit role?
Yeah, pursuit role is really smart. So it takes the premise of a combat role, which is basically like everyone's working together, you all roll dice, and you're trying to get over the endurance of whatever your adversary or monster is. And it takes that and just says, instead of trying to fight someone, you all work together, make your rolls, and you're just trying to evade them. Like it's the same setup, but just a different fictional outcome, and it works really well.
Yeah, I thought so too. And it kind of goes back to what I said in the beginning of one of the things I learned is you don't have to tweak the rules much to make things happen in the fiction in this game. And I think it's a strength of the game, as well as giving plenty of space for the incursion writer to do what they need to do, you know?
Yeah.
Making it very, very easy to be creative, I think. I thought that this one also it was really interesting because the sets are actually districts of a city, you know?
That was really smart, yeah.
Yeah, and so basically the way it works is the sets are the district of the city. The props are places down below that the characters can like swoop into and steal from, I guess, or do what, you know, have adventure in before they go back up to the rooftops and go to the next district, right? That was a great way of using the structure. I thought that each of the city districts felt very distinct.
Yeah.
And Jim did this really neat thing where they each feel distinct, but there's a lot of symmetry between them. And so, for example, at one point when you're in the fancy district, the rich district, one of the moments is the varied and heady aromas of a multi-course gourmet feast waft from the triplicate chimneys of a richly curtained townhouse, making your mouths water. But then you get to this lower class district, or sort of a middle class district, and you get a similar moment, but it's just it's different. So this one is the solid brick chimneys carry the aroma of stews and roasts skyward. So it's not quite as rich and decadent, but it's like it's a symmetry with the other one because it's about smells, it's about food, right? So I just like that, and it's just filled with stuff like that.
Yeah. Just thinking about like some of the other props and elements that are in it, like this is such a classic trope that you want to see certain things show up in it. And I was really pleased to see like all of the elements that he included as things you could play around with. So there's scaffolding and ladders and construction equipment. There's like the classic clotheslines with drying clothes, which can lead to so many adventures. There are spiked fences. There are not one, but two different bird cages that you can interact with, and a rickety water tower that will almost certainly fall down. It was just like every time I ran into one of those things, I was like, oh, yep, that I know exactly how that's going to get used. It was so much fun.
I loved I just loved all the sort of like bored animals on the rooftops, right? Like the quote, a large scarred tomcat with his harem lounging in the heat given off by a tin stove chimney. He watches you with bored curiosity. There's quite a few little animals like this where they're just like, whatever.
There's even one of the treasures is an animal, which is great. So like at one point you run into, at the very end of the incursion, you can run into a cat that has like an elaborate necklace that lets you know, or an elaborate collar that lets you know that it belongs to someone from one of the fancier parts of town. And if you take it back with you, you can like get 4 gold out of it, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's so great. All right, anything else before we move on?
Just the only other thing that I wanted to point out is Jim is the person who brought to Trophy the idea of the sisters. These maybe treacherous saints who are sort of figures of worship. But the sisters, no surprise, were like really well integrated into this incursion. It was really fun to see.
Yeah. There's that one encounter with the big stone statue.
Yes.
Of one of the saints, which is really, really great. great job, Jim. We love this one. It was exciting and high adventure and very well executed and well-deserved runner-up. Okay, I will announce the next one.
Cool.
The next runner-up is The Anchor of Phone by Calvin Johns, with the theme of Anchor. All right, so the overview of this one. A giant, big-ass anchor drops from the sky and smashes a barn. And there's a chain going up into the sky, and people are showing up to climb the chain. And if you do climb the chain, you find a floating island that is powered by a trapped sylph. So that's our overview. What'd you like about this one?
Just the opening mystery is so great. So this all takes place across this strangely shaped area of fertile land. And all of a sudden, like, the land is not great anymore, and there's a giant anchor in the middle of everything. It's just such a, like, I mean, it's Jack and the Beanstalk, right? There's even a giant in it. But it's so smart and so cleverly done. And the way that anchor as a theme is integrated is so smart.
It's subtle and careful and interesting. It was probably one of the most interesting theme discussions of all the entries we got, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So the anchor, obviously there's this big anchor, right? But the way that anchor gets incorporated throughout the various sets is really smart. At one point, there's a young child who's like the only survivor from this island who you can pick up and take with you, and she offers you skills and has knowledge and stuff, but she literally like sort of weighs you down during combat, right? You have to
Right,
roll an extra weak point for her and protect her, and it was really smart, and I loved seeing that, just like a little twist on the mechanics to help reinforce that idea of theme.
Well, that's actually a good segue to what I wanted to talk about. The thing that I found most impressive about this incursion, and indeed I think it's of all the incursion entries we received, I think this incursion did the best job with this, which is Calvin did awesome things with the rules of the game. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is so clever. Like, example. Well, okay, the one you just talked about is great. Like, you get that extra weak point for protecting that little girl. So elegant, so smart, and just a great way of mechanizing that very important fictional moment, right?
Yep.
Just elegant as fuck. I loved it. Also, when you're climbing the chain to get to the island, that's a combat roll, but it's not just a combat roll. Your weak point is you sharing something about your character's past and heights.
Yes. Yeah.
Which really I thought was so smart. Yeah, really, really smart. And also it even has like a little built-in set of paint the scene questions in order to sort of flesh out like just the experience of being high up in the sky on this chain. It's so well considered and such a cool moment. I think that it incorporates the paint the scene technique throughout, which I think is really great.
Really smart.
I obviously I love that because that's my technique, but it really, really adds to the richness of the experience, I think. Just so many cool little mechanical touches. There's that one set where you basically build your own props, traps, and treasures using tables.
That was really cool.
So cool. Yeah, really great.
One thing that I love about that is it just like there's this kind of like theory or mentality in OSR design which really wants to encourage the GM to be just as surprised as the players when something happens. And so being able to just kind of roll those up in the moment and have this like cool replayability built right in was so neat. I loved that.
Yeah, that was great. I also liked the general aesthetic here, which very much smashes up a sort of natural or pastoral sensibility with the mechanical. I thought that was really great. And it starts right in the beginning, right? When you have this big chain and anchor that lands in this farmland, right? Like straight away, like very literally, like the mechanical smashes into the pastoral, right? But it actually continues on from there because once you get to the top of the chain, you're in this engine room, but then the engine room gives way to these beautiful gardens and this chateau. I just loved that blend of scenery and feeling. I thought that was great.
Yeah. I think just like there are a lot of great aesthetic moments too, like the sort of patron saint who the people who live on this skyship island worship or are devoted to is this glass blower.
Right.
And so there's lots of great like glass elements interwoven throughout. The sylph, the sort of captive sylph character, you have this kind of spiritual entity that you can't even really talk to, like you just communicate through feelings. I thought that was just a really nice touch and juxtaposes those elements of kind of natural and mechanical as well.
Awesome. Is there anything else you want to say about this one?
One of the last things that I really love about this is there's some guidance at the end about how things could play out at the end of the incursion, depending on what the characters do. And that doing the right thing, the quote unquote right thing, and sort of freeing this captive sylph means that you're now on giant sky island that's about to crash into the earth.
Right.
And would lead to some fun like escape moments. So I love that about it.
Awesome. Yeah, this was a fabulous incursion. Congratulations to Calvin. This is wonderful. This one also just totally ready to play, ready to go. People should check it out.
Cool.
The next runner-up is, I'll announce this one, Hissing Darkness by Joshua Hiddy, with the theme of darkness. Give us the overview of Hissing Darkness.
Yeah, this one was so great. One of the non-fantasy ones. So this is a sci-fi incursion. And you wake up from like cryo sleep in this giant sort of generation ship. And the ship is acting strangely and the light is running out. And you are trying to make your way to the engine to try to commune with the ship and get it working
the lights
again.
back on.
Yeah, truly.
First of all, the vibe here is so good. It is the aesthetic, the vibe. It's so Geiger-esque. It's so alien. Everything is sleek and black and void-like. There are obelisks and hissing steam and cold, inky voids. I'm so into it. I'm not a sci-fi person,
yeah,
but I do love Alien, and so this appealed in a big way.
Yeah, I love too that it's not just a straight port of Alien. There's all of this like cool ritualistic, mythical, religious imagery that's interwoven throughout it as well. It's just like such a good blending of ideas and play off of the theme of darkness.
Yeah, it incorporates the theme of darkness really well, too. I mean, there's the sort of literal darkness, the sort of effect it has on the character's vision and the way things look, but it also comes out in the sort of construction of the monsters' abilities, how they move through darkness. There's a special rule for how the darkness begins to affect the player characters. Really, really good incorporation of the theme. And I'm telling you, as you're reading this one, I think of all the ones that I read, this one kind of stuck with me, right? This was in the first bundle that I read, and it really stuck with me. Like, it's so unnerving. Everything is so beautifully realized, and there's just this creeping, dark beauty to it, right? And it comes out in every moment. Some really beautiful, big, epic set pieces in this one.
Truly, yeah.
There's this one part that's like this labyrinth, and the way that sort of mechanically that works is really neat, but also it's just really horrifying. There's one set called The Vastness, and I actually took a quote from here. The inner cavity of the ship is impossibly massive, a still cathedral tomb where the darkness cascades like rivers. A kaleidoscope of unsecured stairs, walkways, ledges, and lifts are the only means of travel. The abyss yawns and gapes below. Here the dark things hold their courts within the sea. The gaping spaces and darkness invite the cold embrace of the void. Beware of pockets of vacuum, invisible, choking amongst the shadows. So fucking good. Just, come on, so good.
This was one of those ones where I read it and I was like, I would not want to play this in a single session. Like this wants space, right? Like you want to spend a single session in each set because it's so vast and intricate and well thought out. And even the opening set, when you wake up in these like kind of cold sleep cryopods, that is your fill in for the idea of town, right? Like that's the place you go back to, and even includes like built-in ways to get new equipment through these like fabricator devices. And it was just in this enclosed space, right? Like you're in a spaceship, right? So there's nowhere else you're going to go. having those little moments where you can like go back to those important things felt really important and really well thought through.
Well, and in fact, as I was reading it, I got the distinct impression that there's meant to be more.
Yeah.
Right. Like
and there ought to be. Like, this is so good. It needs more. Yeah.
I mean, it's mechanically, it's actually pretty close to Trophy Gold. It's not like Night Watch where the mechanics drifted to the point where it's like a totally different game.
Right.
This still feels like Trophy Gold. So but nevertheless, the setting is so different and has just enough differences for it to feel like a different game, like, or at least without much trouble, you could make it into its own game, right?
Yep.
And importantly, the ship feels like it's full of possibility. So I can see there's probably 10 or 15 more incursions in this setting, right?
Oh, easily. Yeah.
Easily. And so I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect that Joshua intends to expand this or make it its own thing. And I think you should, Joshua.
Yeah, I hope so. I would love to see more of it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, get some, spring for some really nice art for this and come up with a few more incursions. And this is gold. I mean, this will be very successful. This is a great, great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, just good stuff. Anything else you want to say about Hissing Darkness?
No, it was just really, really incredible. Truly, like you said, when I read it, I was like, oh, this is something special.
Yeah. This one really stuck with me. Okay. That just leaves our last of the runners-up, which is, Jesse?
Sea of Dust by Brian B. with the theme of dry.
Sea of Dust. So in this one, the treasure hunters are on a remote island searching for the wreckage of a yacht, the Moon Princess. And I want to go ahead and just say to listeners that Sea of Dust was very nearly the winner of the contest.
Yeah, it was very close. Yeah,
it was very close. Jesse, I mean, in some sense, Sea of Dust is the first runner-up because basically Jesse and I went back and forth on Sea of Dust and the eventual winner quite a bit until we finally settled on the one that we settled on. But in my mind, it's equal to the winner. I mean, this incursion is fucking amazing. What'd you love about this one?
Oh my gosh. Everything. It's so well done. The theme of dry is incorporated everywhere. So one thing to note is it takes place in this environment that was formerly aquatic. And so everything in it is aquatic, but it's now adapted to this environment where there's no moisture at all.
Right.
So you have like eels and giant mollusks and coral and all of these things that would be living underwater, but they don't have water. So they're just like leeching it from every single thing that they can. And that's so present. That dryness is everywhere. And as a character who's full of moisture, it's a huge threat. Like, the environment is truly dangerous. And I loved that about it.
I snipped out some text here that kind of emphasizes the dryness. And the imagery is so beautiful. So here we go. Desiccated seaweed rustles underfoot like ancient paper. Simple, but so effective. A villager pries open a dried giant scallop. The flesh of both dust goblin and dead scallop creaks like thick leather. And probably my favorite one. A row of motionless white birds on the coral turns out to be a group of salt mummified crows that died where they perched. I mean,
so good.
So good, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just packed with stuff like that. I know you like the monsters. I did. I think the monsters here are great.
Truly amazing monsters. So I'm just going to give a list of a few different ones. So because it's aquatic, you have things like, or formerly aquatic, you have giant crabs, but you also have these like weird not dust mummies, but you have these weird like dry mummies with their like creaking leathery skin that live in this lighthouse. You have things called dust goblins, which are like they're mannequins from Trophy, but they reminded me of the Jawas from Star Wars and the Shy Guys from Super Mario Brothers. These weird little creatures with like with masks. I
just have to say, they have, quote, salt encrusted ponchos, and I love that.
So good. The two sort of adversaries or monsters that I really want to shine a light on, though, are the big bad, which is like the shadowy they called it a Nautilich, which is excellent, with smoky tentacles. And then the one that I thought was like truly inspired, and I'm so shocked that we haven't seen more of this in Trophy already, is there's a rival band of treasure hunters, one of whom already hit 6 ruin, and so they're like lost, and it's amazing. It's so scary, and they're so threatening, and they have dangerous magic that will suck you dry. It's so good.
I'll also throw in for the brain coral. I thought the brain coral was great. I've got a description here. A capricious creature of contemplation and reverie. That's good, right? It is a stone brain roughly 5 feet in diameter with a cool, velvety coat of dewy moss. When it turns its attention on the treasure hunters, they feel the overwhelming sensation of having a strange phrase on the tips of their tongues and deja vu for a place they have never seen. Ugh. Just so good. And that Nautilich, so I love the Nautilich. Like I fell in love with that monster. Like even if I never run Sea of Dust, I think I will. But if I don't, I will use the Nautilich somewhere. Because
as soon as I saw that name, I was like, oh, yep, I get it, and that's awesome. Yep. There was one little moment or little conversation that I loved where they're talking about the dust goblins, and they're raising these giant like dangerous scallop creatures, and it says, if asked whether the scallops are dangerous, the villagers answer, not to us.
So good. One thing I'll say, we've been kind of focusing on the descriptive bits and the visuals and the monsters, but structurally, this is a beautiful incursion.
Truly,
it has this like, we haven't talked about like the diagrams on any of them yet, but this one has a neat diagram where there's basically like this central portion that all the rest of it goes off of, right? Yep. And you always kind of return to the central portion. So I kind of like that. And then also, structurally, the author uses every bit of space to tell the story. I talked about this earlier, but it's so important. The additional traps and additional treasures, they continue to tell the story, right? Yep. They're also like really perfectly suited within their set. For example, in the first set, the little traps and treasures have a distinctly nautical feel because at that point the characters are still in kind of a nautical spirit, I guess. Mm-hmm. But then they sort of move on to be a little bit more about this dry, desiccated place. Like it's just all so carefully considered, and it comes alive on the page. And I think this is a really important point to make. And I think the winner, this is something we can say about the winner as well. The key to the success, like the really successful ones in this contest, and I think in general, are not the ones that use huge paragraphs of description, but rather the ones that work in small details in the various parts of the incursion structure. That's really, really important, right? Because it's equally effective in terms of like painting a scene, but also it's very practically helpful to the GM, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's so much easier to just grab the little bits and bobs that are in their various places that they need to be than it is to try to pull out details out of a big paragraph, right?
Right. We've talked a lot about how moments, capital M moments that occur in incursions are the places where, as you weave those in as a GM, really make you look like a rock star, right? Like they're little encapsulated bits of smart writing that's really punchy and evocative of the theme, right? But a good incursion takes that and applies that theory to everything. Right?
Yeah. I think that's a great way of looking at it.
The only other thing that I was going to say about it is that it feels very lived in. Like there is a full ecology, there's a full economy. You can see how all of the elements connect together, and I just love this. It was just truly a beautiful piece, and again, I want to see more of this. This is something that deserves a larger setting and deserves more space to play around in because there are many stories to tell here.
Agreed completely. So let's have a little diversion and talk about some of the things that are coming up in the world of Trophy. And in particular, I want to talk about some of the things that we have coming up in the Codex magazine, because Codex is kind of our staging ground for everything Trophy, right? So something that we have available right now in Codex, in fact, is called Trophy Gold Hearthfire. And that was written by myself. I've been working on it for a long time. It doesn't seem like much, but trust me, it has been through the ringer.
Well battle tested at this point, right?
Indeed it is. So Trophy Gold Hearthfire is an expansion to the Trophy Gold rules. It's an expansion that we always planned, but we kind of wanted to get the core experience of Trophy Gold out there first.
Yep. But
it's an expansion of the rules that basically add some storytelling options to the downtime part of Trophy Gold. And so, like when you go back to town to put gold in your hoard, to heal, to learn new rituals, to buy your equipment, this Trophy Gold Hearthfire is like a separate sheet that has options to help develop your character's backstory, to develop their life in town, and to just learn more about them. And so I've been using it for a while now, playtesting it, and it really, really adds a fun dimension to the game. You don't have to use it. It's totally optional. But if you do use it, you're going to get this, what I think is a much more textured and nuanced take on your character's story. And so I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying using it at the table. And it also has the side effect of making it much more painful when you lose a character because you're much more attached to them than you might have been otherwise. So that's one of the things.
One of the elements that I love about it too is it gives you procedures for when a treasure hunter dies.
Yes.
And you can like rifle through their stuff.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's actually funny because so that's like a whole brand new rule.
Yeah.
The funeral. And that actually came from a discussion that Tom and I had on Fear of a Black Dragon, where we were talking about like how to add emotional complexity to a funnel dungeon crawl, which is just a stupid concept on its face, but it's so Tom and I being on our bullshit, right? But the idea is like you have like a little memorial service for the dead character, right? And in the context of Trophy Gold Hearthfire, so one of the things that Hearthfire adds is it adds elements to your household. So like as you're building up your household, you take mementos from your incursions and add them to the household. And the funeral lets you like swipe something from their household to put it in yours. Good. To remember them, obviously, right? Right. So yeah, I'm proud of it.
You can throw that stuff in your backpack, I noticed too. So it's
yeah. It doesn't just have to go in your household. Yeah. They're still desperate treasure hunters, Jesse. Yeah, so I try to just add a lot of fun things like the carousing. I tried to add just a lot of like levity to that because I think that should be a fun moment. So I tried to make that like a fun little process. One of the things you can do with Hearthfire is whenever you go to buy equipment, you get the shopkeep learns to trust you more and more. So you become more and more familiar with the shopkeeper, and the shopkeeper learns to like you and will eventually tell you a secret that they've been sitting on, and that secret leads to a side quest. Like I don't know, I kind of love that.
So classic.
Yeah, it's just good. Yeah, so I'm pretty proud of Hearthfire. It just takes
it's so great.
It really just expands this idea of your character being back in town, and also explores the drives too. Like the drives, as written, the drives very much depend on sort of table culture and the GM like sort of prompting you to talk about your drives. But Hearthfire presents tons of opportunities to actually explore your drives in play. So it's good stuff. Cool. The other thing we have coming up generally in Codex is Trophy Gold Incursions. We are going to, obviously we're publishing a bunch of Trophy Gold Incursions in the book that we kickstarted earlier this year, but we're also going to be publishing some incursions just within the pages of Codex in the months to come. I would love to publish some of the ones from these contests, and I might get in touch with people about that. So that's something to look forward to as well. And
then I hear there's something pretty big coming too.
There is something literally big and figuratively big.
Colossal, coming. One might say.
Indeed. So Darren Brockus has written a trophy game called Trophy Colossus, and Trophy Colossus is going to be the third official game in the series after Dark and Gold. At some point we'll have Darren on to talk about it in detail, but I'll just give you a quick overview of what it is. Here's the idea. Generally speaking, it's inspired by the video game Shadow of the Colossus, okay? So it takes place in the ancient past of the trophy world, and it's a 1v1 game, one GM, one player, and the player is a sort of heroic, mythic character who is climbing these colossal, titanic monsters. And by the time they get to the top, they have to make a decision about whether they kill the monster or not. And it's meant to be a much more heroic and mythic experience as compared to Dark and Gold. It's meant to be a lot more reflective and emotional as compared to Dark and Gold. And importantly, it's a 1v1 game. It's a duet game, if you will. And so that's the basic setup and the basic tone. Here's the hook. Here's the cool thing. I don't even know if you know this yet, Jesse. The character you're playing is a dream of your present-day Dark or Gold character. So
nice.
You're most likely it's going to be a Gold character. Your Gold character essentially goes into like a dream where they experience this character from the past tackling this colossus. And the way the mechanics work is your Gold character's drives and occupation and stuff like has a bearing on the mythic character. And so the mythic character has what are called it's called a gesh. And the gesh is Colossus's answer to the Devil's Bargain, because the Devil's Bargain doesn't really work in a 1v1 context.
Right.
And so what the gesh is like, it's some kind of like prohibited or prescriptive thing about the character. Like, you can't do X because Y will happen, right? And this sort of leans into the sort of like legendary and mythic feel of the game, right?
That's great.
Mythical characters, heroic characters usually have these sorts of restrictions placed on them, right? And so the way it works in play is the way you get your extra die on the risk roll is you say, I want to invoke my gesh. And so the GM and the player work together to decide like how the gesh comes into play at this moment while they're climbing the Colossus. And it's all, I know that sounds a little vague, but when we have Darren on at some point, we'll go into this in more detail, but that's the basic idea. But the cool thing is, so like essentially you're playing out a dream of the past, right? And what's neat is the Colossi, they carry forward into the future Gold campaign, or Dark campaign, I suppose, but Gold campaign, trophy campaign. They carry forward into the present day one because they leave behind artifacts and magic items that like are left in the world. And so it can be played as just a one shot, as a side story, or you can incorporate it into the campaign that you're already running. And so I'm really excited about it. I think people are going to be really into it.
I love that, especially because we've dropped little hints about there being or having been giants in this world through a couple of the other incursions. So it's nice to see that tie and that sense of history to the world as well.
And I like I kind of big picture, I think it kind of ties into the whole sort of trophy project in the sense that the dream, the sort of dream climb, the mythic character, it's not canonical, right? Like, this may or may not have happened like this, who knows? But we're exploring something about this character through this experience that they have, this like sort of weird, dreamy time traveling experience, and but it's got that like lovely trophy moving target lore, you know, so which we love. That's very intentional design on our part. So I'm super into it. I think people are going to be into it.
Cool. I'm excited to see it. Yeah,
that's coming out in Codex pretty soon. Listeners, if you are not, if you don't get Codex, I really strongly recommend it. It's available in the Gauntlet Patreon. It's patreon.com/gauntlet. You make a $6 pledge. You get Codex, which also has tons of other things in it, not just trophy stuff. But there's a few great reasons to do this. One, you get this great content. It's a beautiful production. You encourage us to keep making more cool content. I mean, Trophy sprung forth from this, right? And we wouldn't have been able to do it without the support that we had from our Patreon backers. And the Patreon also helps pay for stuff like this show we're doing and the contests that we run. So all that is it's all part of an ecosystem. And so we just, if you like what we're doing here in Trophy, in the Gauntlet and all that, like, please just go support it. And with that, we have arrived at the time to announce the winner of the contest. You do the honors, Jesse. Who's the winner?
The winner of the Trophy Gold Incursion Writing Contest is Leviathans Bridge by Gabriel Robinson with the theme of Mist.
Leviathans Bridge. This is great. So, overview. The treasure hunters have arrived at Seeker's Rest, which is a floating mangrove city tended to by goblin seers and lore masters. And this sort of titanic arboreal bridge stretches overhead and sort of culminates in this temple, this sacred temple. That is the basic idea of Leviathans Bridge. Besides everything, or maybe more specific than everything, what did you love about this one, Jesse?
Everything. This is just chock full of moving and super evocative writing. It has so many richly developed characters, both like people you might sort of randomly interact with and key sort of adversary type figures. And importantly, it has a very explicit rejection of some of the colonialist and racist elements that can be somewhat prevalent in fantasy gaming. And so having that be called out right up front and like a core part of this incursion was really heartening to see.
Well, yeah, I agree. That goal that Gabriel set out is terrific. And importantly, it's not just lip service.
It's not.
It's a fully developed idea in the text of the incursion. When I read this, I was just really taken up by it. I mean, I had a very, very powerful emotional reaction to it. I did to Sea of Dust as well, but this one I had a very, very, it was just a strong emotional reaction. Everything is so beautifully presented. Everything is so, there's an ecology here. There's a lived-in feeling. It feels like a real place with a real history and a real lore and real culture. And interestingly, the treasure hunters fare better if they engage with the lore and the history and the culture. There's an outcome here where they don't do that, and it's a harder incursion. But if they do sort of like engage with the place, the incursion changes to be kind of a different thing, and they have an easier time of it. It's so well realized. I mean, it just breathes on the page, and that's just, so generally speaking, that's my big top line takeaway. I mean, it's just so great.
It does this really smart world building where it takes and builds off of what came before with every new element pulled in. So it takes advantage of the structure. This is another one that does not feature very much like true prose. The world itself is created through the format of the incursion.
Yeah, that's just a critical part of this. I mean, and I'm not sure that's something that I understood before. I think that's something I came to understand as we did this contest, as I was reading the entries. But it's an important part of it, and this one really, really nails it. The details are so wonderful. I've got a couple of quotes here. A young goblin feeds leftover scraps to her blue lobster on a leash. Or a serene procession of ash-marked initiates bearing incense and glowing shell lanterns. Their chant rises and falls, the whisper of lapping tides and chorus of thundering waves. Just beautiful.
So beautiful. This one has, in addition to the core incursion itself, features quite a few separate additional tables, which is also a great way to do that extra bit of world building. There's a really great table of items that you could run across. I just want to drop a few of these in here. So there's a bone whistle, which imitates a vulture's scream. There's a silk veil, which turns objects under it transparent. And there's a shrunken explorer's head, which mutters cryptic advice and rambling stories when given liquor.
That's so good. There are... that's actually something else I liked about it. I love the magic items. There are some magic items in here which are pretty great. Such as there's this holy symbol that's a gilded feather, and what it does is it calms the fear of heights or falling when worn. just really like that. I like it because it's kind of a nod to like that classic featherfall spell in D&D, right? So really into that.
And that sense of falling is very present, right? This is this takes place in this crazy, like you said, arboreal bridge forest space. And it does this smart thing where, I don't know why Sea of Dust and this both did this, but it's really smart where it takes aquatic creatures and moves them into a different context. And so you have these big trees, and they're full of like swinging octopi. And the bridge itself, the Leviathan Bridge, is a giant skeleton of a whale.
Right. Yeah. It's so neat, and I think that's what helps make it feel like a really fantastic place. Right.
True.
It's got notes of the familiar, but recontextualized in a way that just is kind of wondrous. Right. It's very wondrous.
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh, I just love this. This is so great. Fabulous encounters here. I think the monsters are a little better in Sea of Dust, but the encounters are really great here, and I think this is ultimately why we gave the edge to Leviathan's Bridge, because they're not combats necessarily, but they are encounters, and I think the fact that they're not all combats, I think, is what kind of pushed it over the edge. So talk about those a little bit.
I think the marquee encounter here is with a character called Grandmother Greenteeth, who's a skeletal mermaid. One thing that I've talked about a lot on the Discord, and in places here and there, is that a combat is meant to defeat an adversary, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean kill. There are lots of ways that can play out. And this incursion takes advantage of that, this encounter in particular, where the weakness of Grandmother Greenteeth is praise. You can truly defeat her by complimenting her, which is so smart, and gives the advantage to characters that have skills and things other than combat, which I think is really great. If you kill her, she comes back anyways. So there's that.
If you needed any more inducement to not go into combat, I think that this incursion has a real point of view, right? It has this real perspective that it's a fresh perspective. It's a perspective we don't frequently see in fantasy gaming, or I should say, I think a lot of people are trying to encourage right now in fantasy gaming, kind of get away from this sort of like murder hobo sort of thing. And, I love a murder hobo adventure, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm very into that, but I like stuff that's just, I love classic dungeon crawls like that Colossal Wreck. I love really gross shit like Mother's Milk, but I love what this is doing. It has a real point of view, and it elevates is not the right word, but it definitely expands the notion of what a fantasy adventure means, right? And what a fantasy adventuring location can be, right? And so that's pretty great.
Part of the way that it does that too is by having these just like fully realized characters with their own personalities and motivations and tics, and then things that they ask you to do. So there's a couple of them that I just wanted to share. So Kiri and Neely are identical twins who speak their own language, understand animal speech, and never forget the day's weather. They're bald, bright-eyed, and perceptive. Masrudin was once a goat herder, now intent on training octopi to catch shrimp for him. Braided gray goatee, complains of joint pains, full of obtuse proverbs. And then Ningal, a weaver, masked fortune teller and cultivator of moongrass. Long braids, shell necklaces, mysterious smile. A flying fox companion brings her treasure. And then they have little quests that they send you on if you're trying to explore this incursion and go deeper into it. If you just push your way forward, you're going to get met with harsh glances or worse. So instead, if you do things like clear a path of carnivorous plants which threaten their family's shrine, or escort them to the temple to inter their loved one's ashes, that is your way forward, right? It promotes conversation, exploration, interaction, all the things that you want out of a great role-playing experience. They're built and packed right into this.
I agree 100%. This is a wonderful, transcendent incursion. I think Gabriel really, really knocked it out of the park, and I want to publish this. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I really want to. Yeah, this is great stuff. Anything else you want to say about it?
Just incredible job. Kudos to Gabriel. Kudos to all the runners-up. Kudos to everyone who participated in this contest.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, before we go here, look, we've said this during the Dark Contest too, and it's just as true here. There is a contest, yes. There are prizes, yes. You get to get a shout out on the podcast. That's great. But honestly, the point of this is just to foster a creative community, right? And so anybody who participated in the contest should feel so proud of themselves because, for one thing, there's a really strong chance you did a great job. Like it's almost everyone. I mean, pretty much everyone did a really great job. But also just the way that you interacted with the community, the way that I could tell that people were kind of inspired by doing this. I know many of you are going to clean up your entries and kind of release them as as products that people can pick up. I love that. That was the point of this contest. The point of this contest was just to create and foster community, and I think it was a great success in that regard. But having said that, congratulations to the runners-up and the winner. This is great stuff, and I'm super excited to see what happens in the future with Trophy Gold. I think this is just the beginning, right?
Yep.
Well, that is the show. This podcast is a production of The Gauntlet. You can find The Gauntlet on Twitter at GauntletRPG. You can find Trophy generally on Twitter at TrophyRPG. There's also a website, trophyrpg.com. We have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/Gauntlet. Please go support us there. That would be great. And yeah, I think that's all I've got. Jesse, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
And thanks, listeners. Take care.